Hi everyone, my name is Florian. I'm here with my coworker.
Hey everyone, my name is Yuan Chen, and we both work in Google.
And today we're gonna present our work titled User Attitudes Towards Ad Interest Estimated on Device by the Browser. And as Yuan said, we work both at Google, more precisely at Google Chrome. And this work is related to Google's efforts to deprecate third-party cookies and replace the capabilities, some of them that third-party cookies have, with an alternative API, more precisely the Topics API. The goal of this API is that once third-party cookies are deprecated, that there is a way that publishers and in the ads ecosystem, there is a way to have information about interests from a user, but not in a more privacy-preserving way, and not have individual third-party cookies that are placed basically on the device. And what we wanted to find out in this work is if users perceive, which is the assumption, given the higher transparency and control, that we give users a higher value eventually of personalized ads for both the user, potentially also for the sites they visit, and a higher level of privacy. With these controls, if we compare it with the current controls that exist in a browser, which are the cookie controls. And our main contribution, what we found out is on the right side, you can see our prototype that we used for the study, the final result, how it looked like, what our participants in our study saw. And when being presented with that UI, in contrast to the cookie blocking or general cookie browser settings, we saw that people reported that they see a high value of personalized ads when they browse the web, and that they had a higher perception in terms of the level of privacy they're granted and feeling of control. And now we're going to walk you more detailed through our approach and the results.
So the first thing that we did was to create the design concepts. We used two design concepts for our study, and both of the concepts are set within the context of Chrome settings. The first one is based on a model of like-dislike topics. So you can see this list with a series of topics. And our main assumption was that people could influence the algorithmic inference model by liking or disliking. In the second concept, we use this chips approach. So you can see these sort of blue bubbles. And once users clicked on it, we gave a few options. So users could save the topic. They could save it for a specific period of time in our prototype 1 month, or they could choose to not show it ever again. Okay. And with those two concepts, we ran a qualitative pilot study with participants in Germany and the UK. And we found quite a few things, but we just sort of put in the highlights here. We found that essentially outcome-based controls. So you can see here, we had in the second prototype something that said, don't show again, provided a lot more clarity than the like-dislike model, even though that model was very known to a lot of people. The second thing that we found was that saving a topic did not provide very clear value to most people. So in our prototype, we had this option to save it for a specific month. And many people just mentioned that that would not necessarily something that they will remember in the future. And this is probably the most important part of the learnings, is that the concept of expiring resonated very well among most people. So in our concept, we had this phrase that, the weekly topics will auto-expire. And that really increased the sense of user urgency among the participants. So with that in mind, we essentially chose concept 2, and we made a few small tweaks for a large-scale survey that Florian will talk about.
And in the survey that we fielded in the US and in the UK, with more than 1,000 participants in each country, we presented the respondents with 3 scenarios. First one, we showed them the current cookie controls and told participants that all cookies would be allowed when they browse the web. In the second one, we told them that they have selected the block third-party cookies option. And in the third scenario, we then presented them, we introduced this new concept, and we told participants that instead of the previous controls and previous technology, that there's this topic-based personalization enabled. and showed them the UI that Yuan just described as well, which was basically the outcome from the first part of this work. And for each scenario, we then asked participants, the respondents in the survey study, about the value that they see in personalized ads when they are basically based on the respective approach in each scenario, the level of privacy that they perceive, and then the feeling of control, and if they perceive basically or expect that the web ecosystem, mainly the publishers, the sites they visit, can benefit from that approach. And the first thing we learned in terms of user value of personalized ads was, as you can see here, we always asked after each scenario, as I just mentioned. Here you can see the delta between scenario 3, topic-based personalization, minus the cookie scenario 1, when cookies are enabled. And what we see is that over the course of our survey, that respondents were more likely to report a higher value of personalized ads when ads are personalized based on the topic-based approach, in contrast to third-party cookies. And more precisely in the US, where we had 37 people who gave a higher rating, it's about 3 times as many compared to the ones in blue here in this graph that reported a lower value. And we saw similar numbers in our UK sample as well. Looking into the other variables that we looked at, you can see here the top 2 boxes from our question if people were confident that the respective statements from our variables were true. This is the UK data. In blue, you can see scenario 1, all cookies are allowed. In gray, you can see third-party cookies are blocked. So that was scenario 2. And scenario 3, the topic-based personalization approach. We look at the perceived privacy, where we asked if respondents expect that the browser protects them from being individually identified. I think that was very interesting. While we saw statistically significant differences between all cookies allowed and the topics-based personalization approach, the range, we didn't see differences, and it was very similar range with the third-party cookie blocked approach, which makes sense because we tell them that third-party cookies do not exist anymore in this scenario 3. But when we then also look in terms of user agency, if the browser gives them control over their personalized content, there we saw significant differences and a way higher benefit in scenario 3, where we can have the capability to show and provide users with the inferred topics of interest and respective controls. And last, also an important aspect for this overall approach is that, and this is again from a user perspective, primarily when they engage with such a UI, but we also saw, which is important, that respondents, so users, they were all Chrome users in this sample, they do also expect that this new approach can be potentially a balance, while they expect that publishers, the sites they visit, might potentially benefit less compared to third-party cookies, which is more granular and provides potentially a higher value of targeting. They see, they expect that sites can still benefit more when you, instead of, in contrast to just blocking third-party cookies at all without any alternative. And overall, when we reflect on this whole work and the different steps that we pursued for this work, we saw that the right design for such a new alternative and new browser controls for ads personalization can boost the transparency for users and also the control that they have and that they perceive. And as I mentioned, also important that this is a potential approach that from a user perspective